President also yesterday spoke about to improve our economy, we need to sort out electricity supplies, accelerate the pace of economic reforms, deal with crime and illegal mining, and improve the regulatory environment. Dr. Nthabiseng Moleko is a senior economist at the Stellenbosch Business School. Dr. Moleko, good afternoon to you. Do you agree with the President's diagnosis about what needs to be done? Are those 4 key areas that we need to focus on?
A very good afternoon, Stephen, and to your listeners. I think the first thing that I want us to take back when we talk about mining is the model and the model of mining in South Africa and really the continent. We need to really have a discussion about the extraction of minerals, whether it's gold, diamonds, the platinum group metals, or any other mineral of value that we extract as a country out of our economy. If you look at South Africa's trade numbers, the bulk of our trade, 28%, including a 29% of metals and precious metals that is unprocessed and unrefined, leaves our country annually. Forex leaves our country annually. The value added of those goods and services that could be developed in our value chain, it is foregone if you export unprocessed mineral goods. The second aspect that I think is usually missed in the mining discussion is the extent to which South Africans themselves, particularly black South Africans, are involved in mining. And miners themselves, who are employees in the mining value chain, actually have a share in mining capital and equity in these projects. I believe that these are critical discussion points when you talk about the type of mining model that we want to see. We simply talk about continuing mining in the extractive sense. We don't talk about the reforms that are necessary to see a just economic model for mining, and I believe the discussion must start there, so that if mining expands, if you start to see equity and dividends and shareholder value increase, we see the benefit and the distribution reaching not just 1% or the top income decile within the mining value chain, but it reaching the community and also the greater part and portion of South Africa, because the value chain and the manufacturing component is actually localized. And that is the discussion we've got to see. If we continue to improve mining only for it to benefit 1% of the population or 0.5%, which is the top income decile of the population, it doesn't benefit the majority. And I think this is the problem on the continent of Africa, is that we've got to have a discussion about what is the appropriate mining model? What is the appropriate extraction? How do we ourselves beneficiate and make sure we don't export our valuable goods without adding value? If we've got to reform our infrastructure, our manufacturing policies, our financial and capital markets and systems to enable us to develop and further manufacture our unprocessed goods, that is the discussion we must be having.
There's so many issues around economic reform. The President's been talking about economic reform for years. He spoke about a social compact back in 2017 before he even became leader of the ANC. When we look ahead to tomorrow night's speech, there's almost a sense of despondency, an expectation, a very low expectation that there'll be nothing tomorrow. Do you think the President's going to announce anything new tomorrow, even a nod towards beneficiation, which the ANC's been talking about for 15 years?
I think, Stephen, when you talk about the State of the Nation address in the current context that we are in, I think it's a pivotal time for South Africans and also our leaders to take a step back. I think what we've ordinarily seen in these moments is the normal type of speeches where there are promises that are made. There are, I'd say, targets that are set. And what we don't necessarily get to see in the context of the South African State of the Nation address is how far we have come, is how the progress that has to be made based on what was promised in the previous years. And I think when you look at the current status quo, when you look at whether it's the social cohesion, when you look at crime statistics, you're seeing an increase of murder, violence. Lives in South Africa are not valued. When you look at the current economic situation and the plight of many of our people, when you look at unemployment, the indices, when you talk about redistribution, if you look at the impact of the energy crisis, which just is one point in time, it has a multiply effect across all sectors and spheres of society. We are in a state of crises. And I think we have to step back. My hope is that at this point in time as a nation, we are not going to simply hear another presidential speech. My hope is that the nation will step back and ask itself, what is the required and necessary conditions for us to move forward? Are the current status that we have, or the current economic and institutional and even a governance framework that we have, the necessary condition for us to move forward? And I think as a nation, we have to have a moment in time where we reflect and we actually say, we possibly cannot continue to go along this path. For us to be despondent is not the solution at this time as a people and as a nation. And I think the nation has to be called to action, to prayer, Stephen, to reflection, but also to decisive action that will be implemented, I'd say, by people that have a deep concern for the nation, a deep compassion for the people who are suffering right now under the current economic status quo and the crisis that is impending. There is a need for us to have, I'd say, something that hasn't been done before. And I don't quite know what the answer to that is in its entirety, but we cannot continue to do everything we have done in the previous years. It hasn't yielded results. So something deliberately different has to be put in place. And that may require a greater discussion outside of the normal modus operandi. That may require stakeholders to come together to say, as South Africa, what is it that needs to be done by civil society, by the government, by the different political parties, by all the people of South Africa, and come together to say, what are the necessary required conditions? And we cannot continue along this trajectory, lest we do, and we will see the perishing of the country, because there doesn't seem to be a vision. And I think that that is what we need. We need a vision for this country. And I believe there are people who are birthing and who are carrying a vision for this country, who have been crying out for the abundance and the good things that we want to see in this nation, but simply they are not yielding, or we are not seeing the results because maybe the people that are in authority right now do not carry that vision.
Dr. Moleko, I mean, there's another thing that's happening, which is I wonder if government is just getting weaker. Its ability to influence the economy is getting weaker. There's almost a process of privatization by stealth. First, the crisis at SAA. I still don't know what's going on there. Then we have a greater role for the private sector in the generation of electricity, also because of a crisis. Now we have Transnet offering a 20-year concession to a private company to run the cargo railway line between Durban and Johannesburg, also because it doesn't have 5.5 billion rand, the result of a crisis. Is government losing the ability to influence things?
My view on that is that state still has economic policy and economic levers that it can employ to have an effect in different sectors, in the different arms and layers of the state. What you have mentioned now are a few state-owned enterprises who have implemented within the context of where they are operating what we believe or what I would refer to as action plans. Now, the impact and the outcome of those action plans should be in alignment with the vision the country has, with the intent that we had set up those institutions for as a country, because you must remember, those entities and arms of the state should be servicing the interests of South Africa. So any state-owned entity or enterprise in of itself should be heading towards the National Development Plan goals and the long-term imperative goals from an economic perspective of the country. And I think where there is such a disjuncture and non-coordination, we've got to come together. And this is why I'm emphasizing the need for a kind of a collaboration. I think it was one of the political leaders who mentioned something of an economic codessa. When I talk, and I've heard a little bit about this, but not in detail, what needs to really happen is, my view is that we've got to get everyone together at the table. We've got to say what is needed from the SOEs, including the business sector, including private sector, including the state, the fiscal policy, the Ministry of Finance, the budget. all arms of the state, the Reserve Bank and the monetary policy arm, should be coming together to say what is required for this country to go forward. Right now, we are targeting 0.6, 0.7% growth. We have an imploding unemployment crisis in some provinces. 4 out of 9 provinces have over 50% unemployment. That means the majority of our people are sitting at home. Interest rate hikes are impending. People are not affording their livelihoods. And we have a situation where energy, in the last month, we have had almost 30 days of no energy. And there is no discussion about how, from a collaborative perspective, we are going to come together, all of us, all the entities, all the arms. And I know there's been social pact discussion since 2-3 years ago. It has not yielded outcomes. Doctor. And I think a deliberate action has to come forth that requires everyone to come together so that we can have a solution-based outcomes with people who are critically able to do these from a merit perspective who can solve some of these problems.
Dr. Nthabiseng Moleko, thank you. Senior economist at the Stellenbosch Business School. Do appreciate the time.